In the world of medical technology, there is a massive race happening right now. And it's not really about who can build the next great device, it's about who can build the ultimate AI platform. Today, we're going to look at four absolute giants who have a serious head start, but, well, they're all missing some key pieces of the puzzle. Let's break down exactly who they are and what's holding them back. See, it's just not enough anymore to build a better scalpel or a smarter implant. The real prize, the thing everyone is chasing, is creating a single, connected AI ecosystem, something that can take in all the data, streamline how doctors actually work, and in the end, guide those life-saving decisions. It is a huge challenge, and believe me, not everyone is starting from the same place. So who are these companies caught right in the middle of this AI battlefield? We're calling them the transitional players. And you shouldn't think of them as underdogs, not at all. Think of them more like heavyweights, who are just one or two big power moves away from completely dominating the entire field. Now, what's so fascinating about this group is their raw potential. These are companies with genuinely strong foundations. They either have a literal treasure trove of data, or they control a critical workflow inside the hospital. But, and this is the big but, they all share a common problem. They haven't mastered all three pieces of the puzzle yet, and that leaves these strategic gaps that separate them from the true leaders. And this brings us to the core idea for our entire analysis today, the triad. To really win this race, a company has to master three things. First, you have to own the data. Second, you've got to control the workflow where that data gets used. And finally, you have to be the one that drives the actual clinical decision. We're going to use this triad as a lens to see exactly where each of our four big players stands. All right, so here's the plan. We're going to break down four heavyweights. We've got Johnson & Johnson, who are building this massive data empire. Then there's Boston Scientific, who are starting from inside the device itself. Becton Dickinson, who just dominate a critical hospital workflow. And finally, Philips, who's trying to manage the entire patient journey. Each strategy is powerful for sure, but each one has a really fascinating flaw. Okay, first up, Johnson & Johnson MedTech. Their whole strategy is about building an unbelievably powerful data foundation that stretches across their entire global company. So J&J's big bet is on what they call a digital thread. Just imagine a single, unbroken string of information that connects a medical device from its very first design sketch all the way to how it performs in a patient years down the line. It's incredible. They use this data stream to manage their own business with an AI control tower that basically acts like air traffic control for their whole supply chain. And right here is where it gets super interesting. All of this power, all this data, it's being used to make the business run better. That's the operational side of things. Think of it like an AI telling a hospital when it's time to order more supplies. But here's what it's not doing yet, the clinical part. It's not helping a doctor decide on a patient's treatment. And that, right there, is the gap. So for J&J, the data foundation is solid as a rock. But that bridge to actually impacting clinical care, it's still under construction. Now, let's look at a company that took the complete opposite approach, starting with the patient's body and building its way out. That brings us to Boston Scientific, and their strategy is almost a perfect mirror image of J&J's. They build their AI from the inside out, starting with the very device that's implanted in a patient. Their strength comes from these rivers of data generated by their cardiac and vascular implants. We're talking real-time heart signals, continuous device telemetry. It's a ton of information. And they've built this really tight workflow around it, connecting doctors, patients, and the devices through some very sophisticated remote monitoring. And here is the crucial difference. Unlike J&J, their decision layer is already deeply, deeply clinical. Their heart logic technology is a fantastic example of this. It actually uses that device data to predict heart failure risk before a patient even feels sick. This isn't just operational analytics, this is genuine predictive clinical support happening right now. But, of course, there's a trade-off. They are absolute masters of the cardiac care pathway. Their expertise is incredibly deep. Their strategic gap, though, is breadth. They don't control the broader hospital systems or the electronic health record platforms where all of a patient's data eventually ends up. And that is what's holding them back from full ownership of the triad. So while Boston Scientific struggles with workflow breadth, our next company, Becton Dickinson, has built its entire empire on it. Their power comes from owning a piece of infrastructure that is literally the beating heart of almost every hospital, the lab. BD's strength is just pure workflow ownership. They absolutely dominate the hospital laboratory. From collecting a blood sample to processing it and getting a result, their systems are the backbone of that whole process. And this gives them privileged access to this massive, continuous stream of diagnostic and operational data. And yet, for all that power, their strategic gap is crystal clear. Even though they own the workflow and all the data that flows through it, they haven't yet managed to translate that huge advantage into powerful AI-driven tools that actually guide clinical decisions. The most valuable part of the triad, it remains largely untapped for them. So for BD, their position is incredibly secure. They have this foundational presence inside the hospital that is the absolute perfect launchpad to build up to that final decision layer. The potential is just enormous, but for now, that gap is very real.
All right, our final player today is Philips, a company that is making a very deliberate, very public pivot to transform its entire business model from the ground up.
Philips is betting everything on what they call connected care. Their goal is to integrate data and workflows not just inside the hospital, but across the entire patient journey, from the ICU all the way into the patient's own home. They're using real-time patient monitoring to create predictive alerts and much smarter triage systems. This really is a fundamental shift in how they think. Philips is trying to move from a company that sells machines to a company that manages patient health outcomes. By focusing on monitoring, imaging, and care coordination, they're aiming to become the central nervous system for a patient's entire journey through the healthcare system. So there you have it. 4 giants, 4 completely different strategies. J&J is building from the top down with their enterprise data. Boston Scientific is building from the inside out with device AI. Becton Dickinson is building on its unshakable dominance of the workflow. And Philips is trying to own the entire patient journey. They all have incredibly powerful assets, but they all have critical pieces of the puzzle missing. The ultimate question really is, who can close those gaps the fastest and build the definitive MedTech platform of the future?